Welcome to Day 1 of the Narrative Elements of a Story by Doyle, 4th grade unit. The next 3 weeks we will cover the following standards, which will include the Information Literacy Standard 1 and the Reading Language Arts Standard ELA4R1, which includes the elements A through E. This podcast focuses on the narrative elements of a story: character, setting, plot, conflict, and resolution. So let's continue to find out more about the narrative elements of a story. Let's take a look at the definition, signal words, and examples of the story elements. Story elements are the features that make up a story. They are the characters, setting, plot, conflict, and resolution of a story. Some signal words for story elements are author, setting, character, mood, illustrations, style, theme, conclusion, resolution, and literary elements. Some real-life examples of story elements is when you see a picture and visualize it in your mind. You write a story and create a character, setting, and events in your story. And you watch a movie, cartoon, or TV show. All of these have story elements. Today we will learn, discuss, and practice the narrative elements of character, setting, and plot. So let's take a look at the definitions of these terms. The setting of a story tells us when and where a story takes place. The characters are the people or animals in the story, and the plot tells us what happens in the story. And when you tell about the plot of a story, you must tell it in the sequence of which the actions or events happen as well. Now let's practice. Let's read the following passage and find the story elements of character, setting, and plot. It was a hot, sunny day at the pond. Turtle was basking in the warm sun. Snail and Frog were playing tag nearby. Frog jumped on Turtle and woke him up. "Hey," said Turtle, "may I play too?" "Sure," said Frog and Snail. The 3 friends played all afternoon. When they grew tired, they went for a quick dip in the pond and then went to sleep. Remember, the setting is when and where the story takes place. The setting here is a hot, sunny day at the pond. The characters are the people or animals in the story. The characters here are Turtle, Snail, and Frog. And the plot tells us what happens in the story. Here, Snail, Frog were playing when Frog jumped on Turtle, waking him up. Then the 3 played all afternoon, grew tired, went for a quick dip in the pond, and then all went to sleep. Now it's your turn. You're going to work in your groups to read the following story and find the story elements of character, setting, and plot. Then we will go over your answers. So take a few minutes. Let's pause the podcast for you to find the elements of this story. Okay, let's see how you did. What is the setting of this story? Very good. One Saturday afternoon in Monterey, California. Who are the characters of this story? Great. Steve, Jim, and Dad are the characters. And what is the plot of this story? Steve calls Jim to ask him to meet him at the aquarium, so Jim decides to ride his bike there but has a flat tire. So he asks his dad for a ride, but Dad says only if he helps him wash his car first. Very good. Those are the correct elements of character, setting, and plot. Now you will be assigned a day for computer time for more practice and review on the narrative elements of a story on character, setting, and plot at the following website. Tomorrow, we will continue with the story elements of conflict and resolution of a story. Welcome to Day 2 of the Narrative Elements of a Story by Doyle, 4th grade unit. Today, we will take a look at the narrative elements of conflict and resolution. But before we begin with conflict and resolution of a story, let's review from yesterday. What are the 3 narrative elements of a story that we learned yesterday? Yes, very good. Character, setting, and plot. The setting is when and where the story takes place. The characters are the people or animals in the story, and the plot is what happens in the story. And when you tell about the plot of the story, you must tell it in the sequence of which the actions or events happen as well. Now we will discuss the other two elements of a story, which include the conflict and resolution. The conflict is the central problem in the story. Every story has a problem to solve. The resolution or solution is how the problem is solved. So let's take a look at an example of the conflict and resolution of a story. Let's read the story. Sean and Justin were having such a fabulous time flying their new kite that they didn't even notice it was heading straight for a tree. Sure enough, the kite soon got caught in the branches. Sean tugged and tugged at the kite string, but it wouldn't budge. He tried to give Justin a boost toward the branches, but even working together, they just weren't tall enough to disentangle the kite. They were beginning to despair when all of a sudden a large gust of wind shook the tree and blew the kite out of the branches. The kite dropped to the ground and landed at their feet. Let's look at the problem or conflict of this story. The conflict in the story, the problem is that the kite got stuck in the tree. As you're trying to find the resolution of the story, you will need your problem-solving steps, which will include 1. Sean tried to pull the kite loose, and 2. The boys tried to work together to get the kite out of the tree. The resolution or the solution of the story is that a big gust of wind came and blew the kite out of the tree and onto the ground. Let's review again what the terms conflict and resolution means. Conflict is the central problem in the story. The resolution or solution is how the problem is solved. Now it's your turn. Let's pause the podcast to work in your groups to read the following story and find the story elements of conflict and resolution, and then we will go over your answers. Okay, let's see how you did. The problem or the conflict in this story is that Tina can't find her cat. The problem-solving steps: 1. Tina asks Kate to help her look for Whiskers. And 2, the girls look all over for Whiskers. The resolution: the problem is solved when Whiskers jumps off the bed after sleeping under the pile of stuffed animals in Tina's bed. Very good. Those are the correct story elements for conflict and resolution. Now that you have learned the narrative elements of a story, you will be assigned a day for computer time and more practice and review on conflict and resolution at the following website. Thank you for joining me at this podcast and learning about the narrative elements of a story.